Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Music Appreciation or Jazz Pop and Rock with Professor Wagner. Before we dive into our first composer or artist, let's lay the foundation of music terminology with which we will grow throughout the semester. As we are focusing on the Western fine art tradition of written music in these courses, we will use terms from the most prominent school of thought in Europe, the Italian bel canto school of voice. Accordingly, many of the terms we will be discussing will be in Italian, with some being in German, French, and English as well. Over the course of this video, we will speak about the following elements of music that need to be established in order to recognize how our composers will deviate from the norms of those rules down the line. The first will be sound propagation, or the pattern that all sound follows. The next will be voice and instrument classifications. This will give us the means to identify instruments commonly found in the orchestra and cover the ranges of typical voice types. Note that when we speak about voice classifications, they may not necessarily reflect the gender assumed by the audience of the singer, but are where that person feels most comfortable singing. Third on our list will be rhythm and meter. This gives a clearly defined beat to music, and meter is how those beats are organized when written down. This flows easily into a quick stop at tempo, which is the speed of the beat. We will discuss the order of typically found tempi to help you know how fast to go when you begin reading a new piece of music. Next up will be dynamics, or the volume of music. We will cover the 6 most common dynamic terms and how to expand beyond those terms when necessary. Form is the organization of an entire piece or movement of music. We will start with music that is entirely contained within one movement at first, and we'll discuss more complex forms like sonata form later in the semester. Medium and subject matter are 2 fairly self-explanatory methods of identifying a piece of music. Medium is what instruments or voices are composed within the piece, and subject matter for our purposes will be a binary answer, either sacred or secular. A more intangible element of music is its intended audience or venue. This may mean that the composer wrote a piece for a specific patron or to be performed in a particular concert hall or church. Next, we will look at notation, or how music is written down in the Western tradition. Most countries that have a written tradition for music follow this model. Pitch ties in well to notation, as by reading the notes on the page, we can discern where to play each note. Expressive markings and articulation are extremely important extra-musical notations that allow a composer to dictate exactly what they intend. These can pertain to a specific note, a phrase, or an entire piece. Finally, we will discuss timbre. Timbres are the particular qualities an instrument or voice has and is the final tool at our composer's disposal. Playing around with timbre is particularly relevant when looking at music from the modern and postmodern eras. Alright, enough setup, let's get into the content. The first thing we will be looking at is sound propagation. All sounds that occur, including my voice right now, follow what is known as the ADSR chart, or the attack, decay, sustain, and release chart. The attack of a sound is the initial onset of the sound. This could be the striking of a hammer in a piano or a voice beginning to sing. It is shown in this chart in red. Next step, decay, occurs almost instantaneously after the attack as some energy transfer is lost. This means that without intervention, the loudest a sound can be is at the exact moment the attack occurs. The final 2 steps are the most intuitive. Sustain is how long the sound is prolonged through the vibrations of the instrument. Release is the stopping of the sound. This can be achieved by hands dampening the vibration of a drum head, or the bow being removed from the string. There are 6 main voice classifications. In order from highest to lowest, there are sopranos, who are typically the highest treble voice and carry the melody, altos, who are a lower treble voice, and mezzo-sopranos, who sing between sopranos and altos. In choir voice parts, soprano 2 and alto 1s would be your mezzos. Looking at the bass voices, named because they frequently read the bass clef, you have the tenors on top, basses on bottom, and baritones, who are the bass equivalent of mezzo-sopranos. 2 less common voice types that are traditionally gender bending would be the contralto and countertenor. The contralto is a treble voice that sings at the bottom of their range, well below alto voices, and countertenors are bass voices that sing at the top of their range, well above first tenors. We will start identifying instruments not contained within the body by sections commonly found in the orchestra. There are 4 main sections of instruments in the orchestra: the strings, woodwinds, brass, and percussion. Starting with the strings section, on top we have the violins. Typically, there are 2 smaller sections of violins, aptly named first and second, and they are the highest voice in the string family. The 2 sections are playing the same instrument, but the typical string quartets written from the classical era onward call for 2 violins, a viola, and a cello. Speaking of viola, they are the next highest voice in the strings section, with a slightly larger body and lower range than the violin. Both violin and viola are played with the instrumentalist holding the instrument under their chin, like so. The first instrument with a floor pin is the cello, which is defined as a rich baritone instrument, and they are able to play a full octave below the viola. Playing an entire octave below the cello is the double bass, the lowest voice in the string family. This instrument is played with a large bow, and the player is standing as opposed to seated in the rest of the string family. The harp is the final member of the typical string section. Harps are not found in every orchestral arrangement, however, so it should stand out when you hear one. This triangular-shaped instrument plays a more harmonic role than a melodic one, with the player plucking several of the 45 strings in rapid succession to provide chordal outlines as opposed to a single melody. The woodwind section has several different instruments, typically played with an open mouthpiece or some form of reeded mouthpiece. The most common instrument on top of the woodwinds is the flute. It is found in nearly every orchestral arrangement and is usually a melodic instrument. The piccolo sounds higher than the flute and looks to be like a shortened flute. The oboe does not have a mouthpiece like the flute or piccolo, but sounds instead using a double reed mouthpiece. This works as a product of Bernoulli's principle, which you can observe by blowing air between 2 sheets of paper. The air creates a vacuum behind it that brings the reeds together, creating vibration and thus sound. The English horn, or cor anglais, sounds a perfect fifth below the oboe and has a more mellow timbre than the oboe. Single-reeded instruments such as the clarinet and bass clarinet create a very fluid sound when blown. The bass clarinet is a larger version of the clarinet and boasts a nearly 4-octave range. The bassoon is a large double-reeded instrument that sounds lower than the clarinet. The contrabass is an even larger bassoon, requiring the instrument to actually bend on itself twice. The contrabassoon is found less commonly than the bassoon, similarly to the piccolo's relationship to the flute. The final group of instruments for woodwinds are saxophones. Saxophones have a brass exterior that may trick you into believing it to be a brass instrument, but in actuality it is a woodwind due to its reeded mouthpiece. The saxophone's timbre is usually classified as smooth and silky, and there are an entire family of instruments from soprano to baritone that have slightly different ranges and sizes. Moving on to the brass family, they are made up of shiny metallic brass exteriors with either a U-cup or V-cup metal mouthpiece. The trumpet is the highest brass voice, is praised for its insane volume capacity, and was originally used for signaling people over great distances. The trombone changes pitch via a large slide that, as it slides out, the pitch lowers. The horn, sometimes referred to as the French horn, is played with the bell facing away from the audience, the opposite of the rest of the brass family. Its tone is manipulated in part by whichever hand is not on the keys being placed within the bell and actually shaping the tone. Moving lower in the brass family, the bass trombone is, you guessed it, a larger trombone, but not in the way that you might think. Rather than it being longer than a typical trombone, as the rest of the instruments we've looked at so far are, it is actually the same length, but has a wider bore and a larger bell to help bring out its lower register. The lowest brass instrument is the tuba, held with the bell pointing straight up, with the remainder of the instrument resting in the lap of the player. Famous composer for wind band marches, John Philip Sousa, created a marching version of the tuba known as a sousaphone. A smaller version of a tuba that plays in a higher range is the mellophone and is also commonly used in marching band music. The largest family of instruments is the percussion family. This is because largely anything can be used as a percussion instrument. In fact, I once attended a concert in which a percussionist emphatically turned pages in a book as an instrument. There are in general two subcategories of percussion instruments, pitched and unpitched. Pitched percussion instruments play specific notes when struck. Unpitched do not play a resonant enough sound to discern that specific note. Here are some common percussion instruments, starting with the piano. Famously a confusing instrument to classify, the piano has strings that sound, but it is actually the striking of those strings with the hammer that make the sound, thus making this a percussion instrument. The timpani, or timpano in singular form, are a tuned percussion instrument playing a specific pitch range based on the size of the drum. Typically, there are 4 of them in an arc around the player. The snare is an unpitched instrument, though the sound can be changed slightly by tightening the drum head. There is also an adjustable band of metal beads that can be taken away from the bottom of the drum to give it a less rattly sound. The bass drum is a large drum that is suspended on bungee cords, most frequently, at least, and the head is positioned at an angle. Typically, there is a towel on the top of the drum to dampen the power of this instrument. A triangle is a small metallic triangle that is struck with a steel beater and has a bright, clear tone, almost bell-like. A gong is a large brass disc-shaped instrument that is struck with a padded mallet and produces a low, rumbly sound. The marimba and xylophone families are large wooden or metallic pitched keyboard instruments played with soft mallets. A glockenspiel is a small metal instrument played with hard mallets. Another way instruments can be classified is using the Hornbostel-Sachs system. This system was developed by the 2 German men it is named after, and this system focuses on how the instrument creates the sound to determine its classification. The first classification of the Hornbostel-Sachs system is idiophones. Idiophones are instruments where the sound is produced by the body of the instrument vibrating, not the string, membrane, or column of air. Examples of idiophones would be the mbira, singing bowls, and marimbas. Membranophones are where the sound is produced by the vibration of a tightly stretched membrane. Common uses of membranophones are timpani, tambourines, and djembes. Chordophones produce sound through the vibration of string or strings that are stretched between fixed points. Examples of chordophones include harps, pianos, zithers, and guitars. Aerophones create sound through vibrating air. Flutes, saxophones, and cornets are considered aerophones. Electrophones produce sound with electric action or amplification, not the instrument itself vibrating. Synthesizers, theremins, and the ondes Martenot are common examples of electrophones. In Western fine art and popular music, the quarter note is the basis for all rhythmic divisions. Accordingly, the default time signature for popular music and most modern compositions is 4/4 time, also known as common time. Pictured here is the rhythmic breakdown chart. The largest common symbol is the whole note, worth 4 beats when the quarter note gets the beat. A half note has a clear note head and a stem and is worth 2 beats. The quarter note is again our basis for most modern notation and gets 1 beat when reading in common time. 2 eighth notes take the space of 1 beat and 4 16th notes make up 1 beat. Next are some terms I will use regularly throughout the discussion of pieces in our class. The first is the downbeat. This is the rhythmic pulse that occurs at every metronomic denomination. For example, this means that in common time or 4/4 time, there are 4 downbeats in every measure that take place at the frequency of every quarter note. Offbeats or upbeats are the rhythmic pulses occurring between each metronomic denomination. The term that describes all rhythms occurring on offbeats is syncopation. Syncopation exists to obscure the beat and create rhythmic intrigue in a piece. The time signature determines what the meter is, how many beats are in a measure, and what denomination of note gets the beat. We will talk more about time signatures in a moment. A dotted rhythm occurs when one of the standard rhythmic values has a dot placed next to the note head. The dot adds half of the original note value to that note specifically. So if we have a half note, which is worth normally 2 beats, and place a dot next to it, then that note should be held for 3 beats total, as the dot adds an additional beat. Time is the concept of how rhythms are organized into a measure. The number on the top of the time signature indicates how many beats are in a measure. In 4/4 time, this indicates there are 4 beats in a measure. The bottom number tells us what type of note gets the beat. The only possible numbers for the bottom are 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, and on rare occasions, smaller denominations like 32 or 64. 1 refers to a whole note getting a beat and is not used very regularly. 2 indicates a half note getting a beat, 4 indicating a quarter, 8 an eighth, 16 a 16th, and so on. Meter is determined by the time signature and is how the measure is further broken down into groupings. There are 4 types of meter for our purposes in binarily opposing denotations. Time signatures that do not fall into these categories will be classified as asymmetric meters. The first pairing is how the larger beats or the macro beats are organized. Duple will be a group of 2 macro beats, and examples include 2/2, 4/4, and 6/8. Triple meter has a group of 3 macro beats and include 3/4, 9/8, and 9/4. From there, we look at how those large beats are divided to determine the other 2 types, simple and compound meter. Simple meter again divides the macro beat into 2 equal parts. Examples include 2/2, 3/4, and 4/4. Compound meters divide into 3 equal parts and include 6/8 and 9/4 time. It is not possible to have a duple triple meter nor a simple compound meter. Only these 4 permutations exist: simple duple, simple triple, compound duple, and compound triple. Tempo is the speed of the beat. Here are some common tempo markings and their beat per minute connotations. Grave, meaning slow and solemn. Lento or largo, they're used interchangeably, both meaning very slow. Adagio, meaning slow and stately. Andante, meaning walking pace. Moderato, meaning moderately. Allegro, meaning fast. Presto, meaning very fast. Prestissimo, very, very fast. Some terms related to changes in tempo are accelerando, which means to gradually get faster. Ritardando, which means to gradually get slower. Rallentando, which is a literal letting go of the speed. A tempo returns to the original tempo. Più mosso means with more motion. Meno mosso, with less motion. Rubato, which is a term that we will see a lot in the Romantic period, is the free adjustment of tempo for expressive purpose. So this may mean that I am speeding up my beat only to then pull back, or pulling back so that I can speed up. And finally, stringendo, which is a pressing on faster, literally translating to tightening the speed. Next up is dynamics, or the volume of music. Some common dynamic markings are pianissimo, meaning very soft, piano, soft, mezzo piano, medium soft, mezzo forte, medium loud, forte, loud, fortissimo, very loud. Common dynamic change terms are crescendo, meaning to gradually get louder, diminuendo or decrescendo, both mean to gradually get softer. A messa di voce is a combination of these two, and is a crescendo followed specifically by a diminuendo. Subito is the sudden change in dynamic. Now, I know this is a ton of information and your brain may be entirely fried currently. At this point, pause the video and come back in a few minutes. We are about halfway through this immense info dump. Go touch some grass, get a coffee, do something that allows your brain to rest for a moment, and come back for the remaining video. Welcome back. Let's talk about pitch. Pitch is defined as the specific frequency of a particular sound. Common tuning practices use A440. This is interpreted as the correct tuning metric based around the pitch A3, or the third A that appears on the piano, and sounds at 440 Hz. Temperament is the difference in frequency between two pitches, and there are two main schools of thought regarding this: equal and just temperaments. In equal temperament, there is a predictable and mathematical tuning method. For instance, for every octave, that is exactly double the frequency as you're going up, or half the frequency moving down. In just temperament, there is a slight skewing of the equal tuning scheme in order to produce a sound that adheres more directly to the overtone sequence. Melody is defined as a series of tones that move stepwise or by intervals and contribute to a recognizable whole. Melodies are classified as either conjunct or disjunct. A conjunct melody is one that moves predominantly by steps. Disjunct melodies move mainly by leaps. A leap is any movement up or down that is not on the adjacent note. A note is the written equivalent to a pitch. Reading a note on the staff indicates to the player which pitch to sound. A staff is how notes are organized. The notes correspond to the staff according to which clef is used. The most common clefs are treble and bass clef, named after the typical voices that operate around those pitch ranges. The notes on the lines of the treble clef are E, G, B, D, F. A helpful acronym to recognize this is every good burger deserves fries. The notes on the spaces of the treble clef spell F-A-C-E, starting from the bottom going up. As you go higher on the staff, the letters go forward through the alphabet from A to G before restarting at A. As you go lower on the staff, the letters go backwards through the alphabet from G to A before restarting at G. The notes on the lines of the bass clef are G, B, D, F, A. My helpful acronym here is Good Burritos Don't Fall Apart. For the spaces on the bass clef, A, C, E, G, we have All Cows Eat Grass. The medium of a piece is determined by the instruments or group of instruments that are involved. When necessary, we will generalize to orchestra or band or choir as opposed to listing out each of the instruments for the purposes of our course. For our subject matter, we will keep things fairly generalized. If a song has a religious connotation, we will be classifying those as sacred. All other songs will be listed as secular. I'm not going to be testing you on subject matter nor on medium, but both are great ways to differentiate between songs for the listening exams. The intended venue and audience are great tools for telling songs apart as well as you study. Venue is the original location type the piece was meant to be performed in. Examples could be cathedrals, theaters, parlors, and concert halls. Expressive markings and articulation are two tools composers use to specify how they want particular notes or phrases to sound. Some common expressive markings are espressivo, meaning expressive, leggero, meaning light and gently, maestoso, meaning majestically, stately, dolce, meaning sweetly, sostenuto, meaning sustained, cantabile, meaning lyrical and flowing, animato, meaning animated and lively, and appassionato, meaning passionate. Some common articulations include legato, meaning smooth and connected, staccato,
meaning short and detached. Tenuto, meaning to press and indicates that the note should be held for its full value. Accent, meaning louder or struck. Sforzando is an even stronger accent, literally translating to forcing the note. Marcato means with emphasis or marked. Slur is a connection between two notes of different pitch. Tie is a connection of two notes of the same pitch. Fermatas indicate to hold the note longer than the written duration. Timbre is the specific qualities of a particular instrument. Timbre usually operates within several descriptive spectrums, such as bright and dark, forward or swallowed, heavy or light, harsh and smooth, thin and full, open and closed, warm and cold. Form in music refers to the structure of a piece of music. We will not be analyzing any forms in this class, but I will identify some major forms and their characteristics as they are developed and show up in our class. Some common forms in popular music include 32-bar song form, 12-bar blues, verse-chorus form, and through composed, meaning that nothing in the song really repeats. Well done! You've survived week 1. You've made it to the end of this lengthy music literacy video and are now prepared for a good deal of the terms I will throw out at you through the progress of this course. You should now be equipped to handle the music literacy quiz due Wednesday. As always, you can email me with any questions you may have or join my virtual office hours from 1 to 3 on Monday, Wednesday, or Friday using the link in the announcement tabs of the course.